All right, welcome everyone to Windows Wow. We're really glad to see such a great crowd here today. We have several featured speakers today. We have Jonathan Hall, our Field Services Manager here at Maine Preservation, Laura Seaton, the Director of Window Dressers, a nonprofit organization focused on storm windows, and John Leake from Historic Homeworks has joined us as well. So we're really super excited to talk to you about windows and how you can keep them happy and perfect into the future. Firstly, a little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to have your video camera on or off. If your connection is unstable, turning it off may help. But if your connection is strong, feel free to keep the camera on because that gives us someone to interact with. And I should turn mine on so you can see me. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. But do please be on mute when you're not speaking to keep the noise level down so that everybody can hear our speakers. You can ask questions during the session using the chat feature, which is on the taskbar on your Zoom tool interface. You can also raise your hand, or you could wait till Q&A pauses during the meeting, and at the end we'll have like a broad-based Q&A session for you. So if you want to wait till the end and speak out loud, we'll let you all unmute and ask your questions.
Hi, I'm Gina. I'm the Director of Development with
Gina, you're on mute.
Am I still muted?
No.
Okay. I'm Gina. I'm the Director of Development with Maine Preservation, and I want to thank our sponsors that made this program possible with their support. Allie, you can go to the next slide.
Terrific, thanks. All right, let's kick it off. Jonathan, you might be on mute. You're definitely still on mute, Jonathan. There you go. Jonathan, we actually cannot hear you.
How about now?
There you go. Great. Technology.
Yeah, it's a wondrous thing. A horrible, wondrous thing. All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Windows Wow. And there's a lot of stuff to cover, so this will necessarily have to be just sort of glancing the surface of Windows and why should we fix these old windows. So usually problems like the 90-year-old window on the left are the result of deferred maintenance and neglect, sadly. And that is actually used in a lot of cases as ammunition for justification for replacing the historic windows. So old windows are sustainable. They're definitely character-defining features. They're competitive with modern replacement windows on a lot of levels, and there's that great embodied energy. So they're not producing more greenhouse gases and they're not filling up landfills. They just need a little attention. So, next slide, please. So a lot of people, notably people trying to sell replacement windows, will, they'll make a pretty persuasive case about, how much everybody's going to save on their heating bill and how leaky and drafty old windows are and how inefficient they are. But when you just break down the math and you do a very basic search, there are study after study after study that show that the recovery period for the cost of new windows is far in excess of the cost of new windows and installation, which generally can't be repaired and usually have a pretty short warranty period. So essentially it's just, you put the replacement windows in and you rip them out in 10 or 15 years and you throw them in the landfill. And studies show that, it takes 34 to 250 years to recoup the cost of replacing your historic wood windows with modern alternatives. So historic wood windows can be repaired indefinitely. They're designed to be repaired. They're designed to be maintained. And when properly maintained, they're actually competitive as far as the U value goes with replacement windows. And that is sort of an indefinite U value, whereas replacement windows have like the 0.20 U value in the first few years of their use, and then they degrade after that. So replacement materials they tend to rely on carbon intensive materials, whether that's plastic, vinyl, aluminum. Shipping costs are expensive. Greenhouse gases being pumped into the atmosphere are extensive. And even the Department of Energy recognizes only a 7 to 12% annual energy savings through new windows. In other words, $71 to $500 per year. And if you're looking at an average cost of about $16,000 to replace windows, you can see that the recovery period is so far into the future that it's not even meaningful. So the old growth wood is irreplaceable. Many times been in service for well over 100 years and can continue to do that into the future. And we're all told reduce, reuse, recycle, and have been for a very long time now. So next. So what we're going to talk about mostly is double hung windows. That seems to be what we encounter most often, especially in residential properties. But occasionally we see other kinds of windows, casement windows, which open outward, more like doors, transom windows that sort of tip out from the top or the bottom, sometimes over doors, sometimes over other windows, steel sash windows a lot of times you see those in commercial buildings, industrial buildings, and the list goes on. Palladian windows are everywhere. But mostly the techniques you use to repair double hung windows are kind of applicable across the board. Next slide, please. So the first thing to do is sort of an inventory of the entire building and see what condition the window's in, how well they function, how well they operate. Not all of them are going to be the same. Some will be in worse condition depending on their location, sun exposure, how prone they are to dampness. Some may not function at all. Some may have broken glass. Some the window weights may have dropped off just from wear and age of the ropes. But they're all things that can be fixed fairly easily. As long as you start in a systematic sort of way and know what each window in the building needs. It's never a one size fits all approach. Next. So the basis for me, or a good place to start with a lot of approaches to historic buildings is the National Park Service preservation briefs, and they have one specifically for windows. And it really does kind of a basic good job of breaking down the repair categories, things that you're likely to encounter over and over again. And like I said, they're just a good basic overview of what you're likely to encounter. Next slide, please. So supplies are not that complicated. Whether you wear a suit or not is up to you, or a sharp fedora. I guess craftspeople in earlier times were more likely to dress better than they are now, but that's for another webinar. I just like the image of the old man in the suit and tie repairing windows. But other than you know, your wardrobe choice, the tools are pretty basic. It's basic hand tools mostly. A lot of stuff you can find at flea markets, hand saws, hammers, the different kinds of putty are readily available from a variety of sources. There's a lot to know about their particular characteristics based on how they're manufactured and how they're made. Basically, they all kind of serve the same function. So, next slide. So, Class 1 repair, as per a National Park Service, is, you know, the just basic maintenance. Clean them up. You might have to do a little bit of paint removal. You may or may not have to pull the sash out. May or may not have to do the frame and jam repairs. Important to check for you know, soundness of weather stripping and air sealing drafts, repainting, and just, you know, the periodic care and feeding of a historic window to keep it functioning well and in good repair. Next. So a Class 2 repair becomes a little more in-depth. Typically, you would have to remove the sash from the jamb, which is not all that difficult. Once you've done it once, there's nothing very intimidating about it. They come out fairly easily because they're designed to do that. They're designed to come apart and go back together again. And what you might encounter there is some rotted wood, some significant failure of paints, some significant failures of putty, maybe some broken glass. And you're just kind of going over the whole of the window from a holistic point of view, and getting the whole thing back into the condition it should be in to function properly, keep the weather out, let the light in. So if you do find areas of decay or rot, you want to treat them with a good fungicide to kill any biologicals that may have been feasting on the wood or growing on the wood. Let it dry again, give it some turpentine and linseed oil to sort of fortify the wood. It helps to keep the water out, give it some necessary moisture so it doesn't continue to dry out excessively. You fill minor holes and cracks with the glazing putty. If they're a little more than major, you could use a wood filler, and for more severe stuff, you could probably use an epoxy, which I think we covered in another webinar of the different kinds of epoxies. There's a lot of them out there with a lot of different strengths and weaknesses, and they're designed for different purposes. So depending on how severe the deterioration is, you might want to research epoxies a little bit. And then, you know, once it's dry and sanded and clean, you reglaze it, prime it, paint it, and reinstall it. Easy as can be. So, next slide, please. So in order to get the sashes out, is really not all that complicated. As I said before, they're designed to come out. So once you take the stop off the inside of the window, so that's sort of the piece of wood that sort of keeps the lower sash in place. And it might have a little bead on it or something like that. And it is visible, so you have to, you know, take a little care in removing it so it doesn't get all beat up, because you're gonna have to put it back on. once you remove that, the lower sash should come right out. If the weights are still attached, you'll be able to tell because, as you can see in the center picture, the rope on the right-hand side is still attached. So you'll be able to feel it. So basically, you just sort of, you can clamp the rope off at the pulley at the top of the window so it doesn't fall, and then remove the rope from the sash, and the sash will pull right out. Once the lower sash is out, you can remove the parting strip, and then the upper sash will come out in the same way. So it'll just pivot right out. And at that point, you can determine whether or not you need to reattach the weights. Reattaching the weights is not all that difficult. Usually if they're on ropes, the ropes just sort of get dried out and frail after a while, so they tend to break from the heavy weight hanging on them. Some people use chains. Chains have the advantage that they don't dry out and break, but sometimes they don't operate as smoothly as ropes do, and traditionally, until more modern times, the ropes were a more appropriate choice. And like I said, they operate smoother, and it probably likely inflict less wear and tear on the window unit itself.
So Jonathan, we have a quick question, referring back to our last slide where we were talking about cleaning it up and drying it out. Guest asked, will the paint stick after the application of linseed oil?
As long as you use a good primer, it shouldn't be a problem.
Great, thanks. And
you have to make sure that the linseed oil is fully absorbed into the wood. So if you don't want any residue from the oil on the surface of the wood itself.
So to make sure that that's the case, so when you touch it, there shouldn't be any like slickness or tackiness to it before you.
Yeah. You can go ahead to the next slide. The class 3 repair, the dreaded class 3 repair. Hopefully your windows are not that bad, but if it's a property that is new to you and has been neglected for a long time, you may find some in this condition where the wood is just completely rotted through, but it's not impossible to fix them. If you're comfortable with basic shop tools, table saws, routers, planers, sanders, that sort of thing, it's really well within an enthusiastic homeowner's ability to do these repairs. The only tricky part is you have to source the proper profile router bit, which can be a little bit of a challenge. And of course, sourcing good quality replacement woods that are compatible with the existing wood of the window. So you don't want too much of a difference of expansion, contraction, and weather hardiness between the new material and the old. And if you're not comfortable with doing those kind of repairs, you could certainly hire a carpenter. Most carpenters I've met will enthusiastically do stuff like this because it's actually what they like to do. A lot of carpenters would much rather do this than pull out a window and put a vinyl window in. It's more satisfying to them, and it's more I guess more in line with their skills and training. So they're usually pretty happy about doing this. If you have to pull out the entire window unit, which sometimes happens, you have to pull out the jamb and the sill and casing and all that. Again, it's not a complicated procedure, but it's best to proceed cautiously and carefully, because it can reveal some other things that you don't want to get into. And masonry walls, if you have those, if you pull the window unit out, you may get some dislodged bricks. And you may have a little bit of a hard time reattaching the window unit into the masonry wall from where it came out. So it's just stuff to keep in mind. I mean, again, nothing is all that complicated. It's just some things to be aware of as you're going forward with a project like this. So next slide, please. So the Dutchman repairs are just basically cutting out the failed material, the rotted material, the broken material, and splicing in new wood where the old had failed. And you could, in theory, I mean, Dutchman repairs are done on stone and masonry. In theory, if you had a steel sash window, you could do Dutchman repairs on it by cutting out something is completely rusted through. You could certainly do a Dutchman repair on that. Most of the steel sash windows are just made of, pieces of angle iron welded together. So it's not too complicated. And especially here in Maine, there's plenty of boat builders and craftsmen around. Can be difficult to locate them, but if you can locate them, they're certainly capable of doing this kind of work. And they're usually pretty happy to do it. So, next slide, please.
So before we leave this one, can you describe a little bit of the activity that's going on here? We can see the draftsman drawing a line. I'm assuming he's going to cut out the piece and then glue into ones. How is the new piece attached?
He's just getting ready to, he's sort of scribing a line on there. So he's going to cut out where the rot is, where the failed material is, and cut a new piece to fit in there. So he'll just make a little template or a little jig that'll fit right in there, and then cut a piece of wood to match it, and attach it. There are a number of ways to attach it, but yeah, you can use screws or nails or wooden pegs. It's kind of up to the craftsman of exactly how they want to do that. Some would swear by, probably wooden fasteners and more traditional means. Other craftsmen might want to use, stainless steel anchors and epoxies and that kind of thing. So it's kind of specific to each job and each craftsman and each set of circumstances.
Okay. And we have a question.
I'm sure John has a preferred method for doing that.
So we do have a question from the audience about this, about what tool is he going to use for cutting out the wood? And John Leake has just shared sharp chisels, fine-tooth saw, etc.
And it took me a while to come around to these things, but those little electric oscillating tools, once you get used to them and once you get comfortable with the noise, because that was the thing that really turned me off, it was the noise. They make this god-awful noise. They're great for stuff like this. You can almost draw a line with them, and there's a wide variety of blades. But certainly, a fine-tooth handsaw would work, and like John said, a nice sharp chisel. John says the multi-master oscillating saw blades. So, like I said, I resisted them for a long time, but I was working on a project where I had a lot of this kind of stuff to do, and it was just taking forever. So I took the plunge and got one, and they're great. So one of the critical parts of, air sealing your historic windows is both interior and exterior storms. Especially up here in the cold Maine winters, keeping out those air drafts is critical. And so Window Dressers is a nonprofit group that holds cooperative insert building workshops around the state. And their executive director, Laura Seaton, was nice enough to offer to say a few words about her organization and what they do, and tell us a little more about interior storms. So, Laura?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much. I apologize if you can hear some noise in the background. My partner just decided to start vacuuming. I don't know why, but these are the joys of working from home. So at Window Dressers, what we do actually is we train, supply, and support teams of community volunteers to build window inserts in their community. So you'll get a group of people together over the course of a week, and they'll be building about 300 inserts for 30 or 40 families in the community. And people who are getting the inserts are expected to participate in the community build, assuming that they are physically able to do so. And what happens basically is you let us know that you're interested in insulating window insert panels, and we send a team of volunteer measurers to your home. We're obviously not doing this during the coronavirus pandemic, so our program is on pause for this year, but we are hoping and expecting to be back at it next year. The volunteers measure your windows with a laser measuring tool and put the measurements into our computer system. And then when it's time for the community build, all of the pre-cut, pre-drilled, and labeled wood is sent there with all the supplies, and teams of volunteers get together, and you're trained in one step of this 6-step process of building inserts. So you might be the person wrapping the double-sided white tape around the perimeter of the frame, or you might be the person putting the foam gasket on the finished insert at the end, so you get a nice tight air seal between the insert and your pre-existing window. So you only need to learn one piece of the process, and you have other volunteers around you doing all the other pieces. And it's sort of like an old-fashioned barn raising for window inserts. Everybody comes together, and at the end of the workshop, everybody gets to take their inserts home. It's a great way to meet other people in your community, and owners and renters of historic homes are some of our biggest fans, because you're able to preserve that historic character of your existing windows and be warmer. So if you're interested, I really encourage you to get on our mailing list, our waiting list for next year, because we're not able to make inserts during the pandemic, given our house-to-house measuring model and our community coming together to build model. We're expecting to have an extra large number of people looking for inserts in 2021. So please go ahead and get your name on that list now. I see a question in the chat if we've done casement window inserts. Yes, we can usually do casement window inserts. Usually you can remove the little crank, just unscrews and place it on the windowsill, and then you can fit an insert in that area just fine. But I am going to put in the chat a 7-minute Pecha Kucha presentation that I did last fall in Rockland. So if you'd like to learn more about how this works, you can click on that link after this is over, and you can see more about it. But window inserts are great. If you're comfortable making them yourself, there are actually lots of tutorials online that can show you how to do this. But not everybody's comfortable jumping in and doing it themselves, and having the support and the tools of a Window Dressers community build can be a great bridge. I'd be happy to answer some questions now or at the end. John, I'm not sure if you want me to answer questions now or later, if anybody has any.
We can do a little bit of both. If there's some questions now, then you certainly feel free to answer those. And if some more come in, we can.
Yep. And we do have a question and a comment. So first the comment, and an upcoming webinar that we'll be doing this year, we're going to take a look at doing it, building interior storms yourself if you don't want to wait till after COVID. We'll have a little how-to session coming up probably in October. And the question from John Leake is, Laura, has anyone at Window Dressers or another organization done a study on how those inserts are performing after 3, 5, or 10 years?
We don't expect to have any significant performance changes over time. It's a plastic film that is used on both sides of the insert. So that plastic does degrade eventually, but our inserts we have cases of inserts that are still in use after 8 or 10 years. And we actually provide rewrap services as part of our community build. So if you do have plastic that's worn out, or what's more likely, honestly, is a cat. Cat inserts do not get along. They see a little fly on that, they go right for it. But you can bring your inserts back into a Window Dressers community workshop, and we will rewrap it for $10.
And we do have another question. The plastic film that's used, what kind is it?
So I don't have the new film right at my fingertips. We actually use 2 different types of film. And for years we had used a film called polyolefin. The trade name was Opti 111, but they stopped manufacturing it last year. So we switched to another film, and I apologize, I don't have the new one on the tip of my brain. But for extra large inserts, we use another film called Clear Mount. But it's basically just it's a plastic film. It's similar to what they use to wrap your meat in Hannaford.
Okay, great. So it's pretty thin. Okay. Yeah. Myrick has a question. What's the estimated cost for an average window? And I guess an average window in this case, we'll call it a 6/6.
Well, I can say our average size window that we build is $39 in pine, and it's about $50 if you want it white painted. And we do, as part of our program, this is part of what makes us a nonprofit, is if you are a low-income household, you can get inserts for free. So we do fundraising and write grants every year, and we provide 35% of our inserts to low-income households at no charge. And then middle and high-income households pay a reasonable fee to cover the cost of the materials and program.
Great, thanks. If anyone else has any questions, we'll do some more at the Q&A part of the program at the end.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Exterior storms are another piece of the equation. Exterior storms are available in a wide range of materials and styles, and I thought the example on the right of those curved exterior storms that just complement the facade of that building very, very well. So it just is an example of, you know, the types of things that are available out there, and some of these may be, you know, locally produced, made of you know, wood or, you know, traditional materials. Others, like the example on the left, it's an aluminum storm window, but it, you know, it's attractive to the building and does its job. It's protecting the leaded glass on the upper sash. It lets the natural beauty of the windows behind carry through and doesn't obstruct them. So it's just another you know, another piece of the puzzle. Requires a little planning and a little thought. If you already have exterior storms and they're functioning well, great. You know, I wouldn't recommend, you know, rushing out and replacing them all because they, you know, they're a little weathered. But on key parts of your home, you might want to take special attention with them. Right by the front entry is a good example. You might want to pay a little bit more attention to those and make sure they're in good condition and attractive, and protecting not only your heat loss and air loss, but protecting the wood windows behind them as well from weather and impacts and that kind of thing.
So I think that last statement just answered the question that came up. Should you use both interior and exterior storms? Or is one better than the other? Depends on the situation.
I think the biggest danger with the exterior storms, if they're not thought out well, is that they can be a little unsightly, but there's certainly a long tradition of using them. And there's a long tradition of using interior storms as well. And, you know, some older examples of interior storms would be made of, you know, oak and glass. The downside being that, excuse me, I thought I had that turned off. I always think I have that turned off. The downside being that, you know, they would be heavy and expensive and would require some significant storage space when they're not in use. Because, you know, ideally you would like to be able to open your window in the summertime when the weather is nice, and interior storms kind of prevent that. There have been some historic examples of I'm thinking of a property I saw in Massachusetts where the interior storm windows were integrated into the wall, so they would slide back into the wall when the weather was nice, and then the screens would slide out of the wall on a different plane. So it was like there was like a cavity in the wall where everything would store away when not in use. Which is obviously you know, a beautiful and very expensive option for that.
Okay, we have a couple more questions here. So, can triple track storms form a tight seal against weather?
I
Laura can take this too.
I would say yes. However, you want to make sure that, you know, they have some ability to like weep moisture away, so that moisture doesn't accumulate between the storms and the you know, normal window plane of the building. So they should have little weep holes at the bottoms of them.
Okay. And next question, do different municipalities that have historic home restoration ordinances dictate what can and cannot be done to restore the parts of the window? Do most ordinances allow for the installation of exterior storms? And Jonathan, I'll let you take that. And I think Greg's here as well. We all probably have some comments that we can share on this.
And I would say that varies from town to town pretty significantly, depending on where you are. All the ordinances are locally generated locally and made.
Your exterior storms, depending on what they're made of, could be much more resistant to escape. So I don't know if you want to unmute and ask that question out loud, or if you want to wait till the end. Just sing out. And while we're waiting, we have some more messages coming in. So Dan Sullivan mentioned, I've got a product called V-Seal 25 years ago. He used this on his 1892 double hungs, and it really cut down on the drafts. It's still functioning well in most of the windows. So I don't know if V-Seal is still on the market, or Jonathan or Laura, if you're familiar with it, but that sounds pretty durable, which is pretty great. Question.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Question from Tom. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that product specifically, but I assume that's some kind of a weather stripping, which I think leads to our next question about weather stripping.
What's your view on permanent and seasonal weather stripping of double hung windows?
It's critical. The biggest difference between, you know, caulking your windows shut and weather stripping is just it still allows a little bit of airflow, a little bit of breathability, a little bit of functionality of the windows. If you want to open the windows, you still can. Whereas just, you know, caulking them shut just sort of is, you know, it can only be undone with great effort. But weather stripping itself is a crucial step in blocking air drafts. And there are a lot, yeah. Actually, I'm cat sitting. He heard there was some blame going around about cats wrecking the interior storms, and he's got a few words to say about that.
Nice.
If I could say a word about drafts as well, with the interior insulating window inserts really help a lot with the drafts. Part of that is just because it creates a tight seal, but of course, ideally you want your original window to have a tight seal.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what happens when you have especially single pane windows and the surface of the glass of your windows is very cold,
Mm-hmm.
the warm air from your room hits that cold glass and the air inside your room cools, which causes it to fall, because cold air falls and warm air rises. And as that cold air falls, it pushes away other air that rises, and it creates a circular air current in your room where the air hits the glass, cools, and falls down. And that creates a sensation of a draft because the air is moving. The moving air isn't coming through the window necessarily, but it is cold air moving through your home and onto your body. And when you put in an insulating window insert, then the air in your home is hitting a warmer surface. And so you don't get that circular air current set up anymore.
Great, thanks,
and
Laura.
let me make one more comment on Laura's comment, which comes from an engineer. And that is that our bodies are, 98.6 more or less, and the window pane may be 32 degrees. So actually the breeze you feel and the source of this circulation is from you. The closer you are to the window, the more of that breeze is literally coming off of your heat to that window. And this is one of the biggest problems with historic windows. People who stand next to them in the winter can feel the breeze, but there's not actually a breeze coming from the outside into the room. The breeze is coming from you. And that this cooling action is, it does occur, but it's not major. And that's why historic windows hold up when they're in terms of doing the long-term testing of their energy efficiency. But what we can't really solve is that feeling that every homeowner will get if they stand next to their window. So, closing blinds, having, barriers between you and the window, having high back chairs, lots of things will help cure that, but not necessarily the perception.
And interior window inserts will also help with that a lot.
Exactly. Yes, they'll basically stop it.
Yeah. So a couple more points on the weather stripping front. So Tom asked, Jonathan, can you finish your point about the materials out there for weather stripping, pros and cons, good and bad?
The traditional weather stripping on historic windows is bronze, sort of that spring weather stripping, which is attractive, traditional, probably not the most effective weather stripping out there, but that is kind of traditional, and does help block some drafts. Other materials are, vinyl and foam and I mean, all kinds of stuff, PVC, and I feel as long as they're, you know, blocking drafts and removable, and you can still open the window when the weather is nice and allow some air circulation around the sashes themselves. I mean, obviously in the wintertime you want a good seal, but you know, when there's a nice breeze in the springtime and you can open the windows, it's really important to be able to do that. So, you know, as far as what is superior, I mean, I think as long as it's reversible and still allows the window to function, I don't have a strong preference about one type of weather stripping over another.
Okay. And for those that are interested, our executive director, Greg Paxton, did find the V-Seal description, which sounds like this product that one of our guests had good success with. So it's in the chat if you want to grab it. That product is still available, and it's V as in Victor Seal. So moving on to the next slide.
Yeah. So sometimes, you know, it's necessary to replace maybe an entire sash, or, I mean, God forbid, an entire window unit. And there are ways to do that, you know, still respect the architectural integrity of the building and, you know, achieve the goal. Hopefully, you know, if people are engaged in a good campaign of regular maintenance, it doesn't happen, but maybe, you know, a tree limb smashes through a sash and it's just beyond repair, or you buy a house and maybe, you know, some of the windows are gone. Some have been replaced with vinyl windows or later windows, and you'd like to get it back to, you know, original condition. There's certainly a time and a place where replacements are appropriate. So it's just, you know, the little diagram in the corner kind of shows how the muntin profiles have changed over the years. So it's not, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are appropriate styles that are determined by the time period of the house. And you know, I've had the best luck with, you know, find local millworks contractors that can make some window sashes. It's not, if you have a halfway decent wood shop set up, it's not all that difficult. It doesn't require, you know, complicated machinery, or, I mean, this is all stuff that was done, you know, with very rudimentary machines by today's standards. So it's just, you know, finding the person who can do it and who's willing to do it and wants to do it. And some of the larger window manufacturers, they may or may not. Some of the larger manufacturers have the ability to do traditional window styles. Some tend not to, because there's just not as much demand for them, and they can't produce 1 million units a year. But there are a few of the larger companies out there who can and will do it. You know, sometimes you know, obviously it will cost more than one of their standard run windows, but you know, it is a possibility. Always get shop drawings so you know what you're going to get before it gets delivered to your house. Find out what material it will be made out of. That's important. I mean, it could be, you know, a mahogany or sapele or Spanish cedar or Western red cedar or white pine, and I mean, it's just, there are a lot of different possibilities that a window unit could be made of, and you know, just kind of know what you're getting before you agree to it. And as far as glass goes, if you want that wavy old style glass, it's out there. It can be. There's some manufacturers who make it, and again, it's it probably costs you some extra money, but it's available. And there are a few manufacturers who they'll do different styles of wavy glass that are targeted towards specific time periods. So it definitely is available if you want that look.
Okay, and we have a couple questions. What is the view here on the impact of keeping historic windows versus new windows on resale value? I know I have my opinion. Greg might even want to chime in on this.
Some of the information I've found has said and this is from people who advocate for replacing windows. They say straight out, you will not recoup your expenditures on the replacement windows through energy savings. You will recapture a portion of it at a resale of the house, but I'm not entirely sure that that's a valid point, because I think if you have in some respects, it depends on the house. If you have a really great example of, an authentic Greek Revival house and it has vinyl windows in it, it's probably going to
hurt it.
It's going to hurt the resale value. Yeah. So it depends on the house quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just hard finance, Remodeling Magazine annually publishes I believe it's national, then state by state, the percentage recoupment of a renovation of a particular attribute of the house, the windows, the kitchen, the bath, the added value that you would get on resale. So they publish that information, and that's Remodeling Magazine. You can find it online. From the perspective of do replacement windows enhance the value of a house from curb appeal perspective? I mean, I'll go out on this. I'm generally no. I mean, depending on the kind of window and the age of the house, it could be great. But on a historic home, like Jonathan says, with beautiful wooden windows that were designed to complement that house's architectural style, it's going to be tough to find.
Yeah, and that are well maintained.
Yeah.
If they're busted down old windows, that's different than if they're well maintained and attractive old windows.
So we have a.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say it's really unfortunate if an owner has lived in the house and then changes the windows to sell the house.
The worst of all possible worlds.
That really is, because they're not getting anything out of that, and yet, frankly, it's done, and sometimes it's recommended it be done.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. Can we recommend or know of a local millworks in the Camden Rockport area? And this could be for the audience. If people know, put it in the chat. Yeah. Jonathan, I'm not sure if you do.
I don't know off the top of my head. John might know.
Yeah.
Of somebody. John's been running workshops and seminars for a long time now, and a lot of his students are actually out there building and restoring windows.
So John, if you do have any thoughts, you're on mute, or you could drop it in the chat if you don't want to unmute at this point. And
sure. Yeah, it's there's a directory in the Save America's Windows book. At the back, there's a national directory of Windows specialists with over a dozen right here in Maine. And if they're what's listed in this directory is people and shops who save old windows, but very often they can also make new ones. And if they don't make them themselves, they know who would in their area. They're part of the state. So start with your local window restoration specialist and work from there to find somebody who can make new ones.
And on the same vein, wavy glass, any suppliers, companies that anyone's aware of here? off the cuff.
Yeah, my main supplier is your local vinyl pirate who is installing vinyl windows. They're pulling out old windows
Oh my God.
and throwing them away. So what you do is you go down to the dump and look for where they throw them, and maybe they set them out and don't throw them, and the glass doesn't break. But also you can go down to the coffee shop where they all stop in for coffee before they start work in the morning and make friends with those vinyl pirates. And they will say, oh, sure, after you get to be good enough friends, they'll say, oh, sure, well, just like come by this project or come by and pick them up from the back of our shop. And I've done that right here in Maine. There's reasons they don't want to do it too, but that's my main source is old windows getting pulled out of buildings. And often you can get like matching glass from a building that was built during the same era and sometimes even the same year as that house for the windows you're working on. And the glass matches perfectly. So
Yeah.
that's an unusual approach.
That's a level of passion you don't often run into, John.
Allie, I also wanted to mention relative to Camden Rockport, Cold Mountain Builders do a lot of historic work up there, so I'm sure they could refer you to a few places to look
Yeah.
into.
Good point. And a couple other sources. So John's approach is probably the best to get at things in situ or in a nice organized way. But you could also check your local free cycle, recycle at your malls. That's what we call ours in our town. But the dump is always a good place, sadly. Restore, someone mentioned on the chat, which is, yeah, that's a great place. There are a couple Habitat for Humanity restores around the state, and there are a number of like architectural salvage places that probably you'd also be able to get paints. There's one in Portland, it's a little fancy, but there's that place down in, I want to say in Kennebunkport that carries a lot of doors and interior and exterior, just building pieces, right?
And if all else fails, I believe I'd have to look it up. I think there's a company down in Maryland that imports glass from Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, and they have a pretty wide variety of old style glasses.
Great. And a couple more sources actually. One of our guests, Gretchen, down in Enfield, has a nonprofit that has a stash of old windows that they just have. They have excess windows there with glass, ready and waiting. It's in Connecticut, but that's an option. I love that. Thank you, Gretchen. And she also mentioned that the Hazardville Institute Conservancy Society has the large stash. Oh, that might be the name of her organization. So that's in the chat for folks that might have an immediate window need. Thank you very much, Gretchen.
That's a great name, Hazardville Institute Conservancy Society. I love that.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit.
Can I step in and ask a question?
Sure.
Well, not ask a question.
Yes, please.
No, make a comment. Wavy glass, and I've been involved in repairing, restoring old windows in an old schoolhouse in Sweden, Maine, and they were old 9/6 like windows. And the most egregious part of that job was stripping paint.
Oh yeah.
That was, I gave up after two of the nine. I gave up, and we had that done professionally by a place down in Westbrook, Bagala Window Works, which does do restoring stuff. But in terms of wavy glass and other old window things, architectural salvage stores are wonderful. There's one by Portland, and I can't remember the name of it right now. There's a nice big one down in Somersworth, New Hampshire. New England Architecture, whatever. They are a wonderful source of old replacement things. If you want to replace windows, 9/6s, they had them, depending on the size you need. So I would strongly recommend people, if they need components for old windows, glass, as well as sashes, check out those places. It's not terribly expensive either. So they're a wonderful source of old things. There is a company, and again, I cannot remember the name of it. I quickly couldn't find the reference. It actually makes wavy glass.
Yeah. There's a few of them out there.
Yeah, Schott, I think, is one of the part of the name. Schott Glass Company based in Germany, I think, but it's in the United States. Anyhow, the resources are out there.
Yeah.
But I would strongly recommend going to architectural salvage places to not only to get good stuff you want, but to encourage them to continue to salvage good old architectural things.
Couple more comments from the chat. So Tidewater Millwork in Days Ferry will do custom replication of historic wood window units. So that's Tidewater Millwork in Days Ferry. And Anna just shared the salvage store in Portland is Portland Architectural Salvage. And I agree, it's a little fancy schmancy, but they do have windows. And another guest verified that the place I'm thinking of is in Kennebunkport, and it's called Old House Parts. If you just do a little Googling, these places are going to start to pop up pretty quickly, and you should be able to find some, hopefully, in your neck of the woods. Cool.
I have heard rumors, this is unconfirmed, that Portland Architectural Salvage is open to haggling if they like you and they like the sounds of your project.
Which is important because they're a little pricey.
Yeah, yeah.
And Old House Parts in Kennebunk is, I think reasonable in terms of its pricing. Whereas architectural salvage tends to get, it's more of, specialized items, whereas Old House Parts is lots of old house parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's more rough and ready. I mean, and that was not me dissing Portland Architectural Salvage. It's really nice.
Yeah.
And they have to pay their rent. And they're just carrying things that
they sell good things.
They really do.
Yeah.
So we have a question from the audience. Kara asks, is there a good way to deal with windows that have what looks like polyurethane under latex paint, where the latex is splitting?
So as the gentleman with the project in Sweden just pointed out, the removal of the paint can be a very trying part of the project. It's the worst part of the project by far. So just another method that's out there, and I think John invented this method, is the steam removal. So it doesn't generate dust. So it essentially steams the paint off the wood and contains all the potentially hazardous lead paint without generating dust, without using toxic chemicals like you find in a lot of paint strippers, and is just inert. It's just heat and water. So that is something to definitely keep in mind.
Great. And Jonathan, a different Jonathan, on the chat has shared a name of one of the glass companies. It's agwglass.com. And John Leake just shared that the steam deglazing and paint removal was developed by Mark Bagala, who's Bagala Window Works is here in Maine as well, which is a fabulous firm.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the correction on that, John. I thought that was your method.
All right. There's a pause in the questions, so we'll take a look at some further reading.
So as everybody can probably tell by our discussion, I mean, the discussion has been great. Everybody's had some great questions, some great comments. This is a very general overview of how to approach your historic wood windows. And so there's a lot more information out there. I mean, more than can be covered in an hour and 10 minutes. So the three titles on the screen now, Save America's Windows, which is John's book, Window Sash Bible by Steve Jordan, and Window Preservation Standards by the Window Preservation Standards Collaborative are three of the leading publications on restoring and maintaining wooden windows. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to John Leake for a moment, and he's going to tell us a little bit about these three publications. Take it away, John.
Thanks, John. So these are the 3 books, and I'll just show you a couple features of each book. This is the Windows Sash Bible. It's written by Steve Jordan over in New York State. He's been working on these windows for nearly half a century, and it's subtitled Guide to Maintaining and Restoring Old Wood Windows. It's extraordinarily comprehensive. He covers almost everything you might need to know. And it's particularly strong on, I'll just try and show you some details of it. It's particularly strong on step-by-step of weather stripping and energy upgrades. But it covers almost all, practically all, other aspects of this window work. Here's my book, Save America's Windows, and it has an emphasis on woodwork repairs. And in fact, Steve Jordan in his book recommends this book when it comes to doing woodwork repairs, like repairing those rotted out sash joints and replacing sills and so on. And it also has a directory in the back that I just mentioned earlier that lists more than a dozen window specialists who do this work right here in Maine, as well as across the country. Third book is the Window Preservation Standards. This was published just a few years ago by a group of window specialists. Right now there's about 250 people all across the country and in Canada and over in Europe who've participated in this project to record what we know actually works on this in this window restoration work. And this book catalogs dozens of repair and upgrade methods step by step, and attempts to set standards. For example, there's an illustration that shows and names all of the parts of a typical double hung window. And so that when you talk with the window specialist, you know, you can be on the same wavelength with them. Mm-hmm. And also includes, we were talking about storm windows and interior air panels as energy upgrades. The Windows Standards Project we met up out in Kentucky. We'd meet up every other year, and about 50 or 70 of us. And the first year we met, we tested storm windows and these interior air panels, interior inserts, and reported the results of that in this book. So demonstrating, you know, using, you know, real, you know, scientific level testing methods to demonstrate that these old windows can be upgraded to match or exceed the energy performance of replacement windows. So, and there's a couple of other good books in case you're building a library. Repairing Old and Historic Windows. This is published by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It's several years old, and it's subtitled as a manual for architects and homeowners, repairing old and historic windows. Well, it's really everything you need to know about old and historic windows, their style and design and history, but has precious little about actually doing the work. That's what these other 3 books are about. It's like how the work actually gets done. And if you have kind of more modern, late 20th century windows, Terry Meany's Working Windows book is pretty good too.
Excellent. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Cool. All right, and we did have a comment from Gretchen to the group. That's the gal down in Hauserville. They steamed all their windows with the steam box from Mark Bagala back in 2006 or so, and it was great, she says. So that's a good endorsement for the procedure.
Yeah.
All right. So, and I see someone, Betsy, I see you taking a picture of this slide, which of course you're welcome to, but we're going to distribute this deck and these links will work. and you'll be able to go and visit these resources too. So feel free if you're excited and you can't wait, but this will be coming out to you at some point, a couple days after the event at the latest. So Jonathan, anything you want to say about these resources for folks? There are quite a few. There are 2 sides.
Yeah, and that's a very abbreviated list, really. Especially once you start getting into the energy efficiency stuff. There's a lot of information out there about it. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. Yeah, but this is a pretty good place to start, and it's definitely a rabbit hole. Windows, more so than other aspects of preservation, I would say, is once you start going into it, there's a lot out there. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of coverage, which these first couple of bullets point to, about the repair versus replace. And I won't call it conundrum because the decision is pretty clear when you read most of these articles.
Yeah.
I would say they're 10 to 2, 10 to 1 against replacement, but yet that's what you hear from the industry, right, is replace. But when you look at folks who are doing the math and doing the science, it just, thinking about what's good for the house and what pays for itself and what works for the long term and what's good for the environment, repair is always winning out over replace, where, it's obviously not damaged beyond repair. Then, we've got a couple pieces in here about just general retrofit and historic windows and their value. And then Jonathan's gathered together a bunch of resources, including that National Park Service technical brief, that will get you started on thinking about how to do this work yourself, or at least be informed when you talk to a contractor, so that someone else mentioned that earlier. Speaking the same language is always good to make sure that the end result is what you expect to get and that everybody's happy. And John just shared on the chat that there's a discussion forum for Windows, which is actually pretty cool. Forums can be great places to get ideas, recommendations, and resources, and that's saveamericaswindows.com. So I'll turn it back to you, John.
I would say that of all the webinars we've done so far, this has been like the one that has initiated the best general discussion among participants. Usually we get some good questions, but this one, it was really has been more of a forum. Everybody's telling about their experiences and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and it's been a good conversation.
Windows get everybody riled up.
Yeah,
excited for sure. So I'm going to open it back up for some more questions. If anyone has any other questions, you could put it in the chat, or you could just unmute and ask them. The group's not so large. I don't think people will lock on each other, so feel free. And I know this sometimes takes a minute. So while we're waiting, I'll tell you about the upcoming event. Gather your thoughts about a question. So in a couple weeks, in October on the 14th, Scott Hansen, who's written a really terrific book called Restoring Your Historic House, The Comprehensive Guide for Homeowners, is going to be here to talk about his book and talk about ideas about how you can live a contemporary life within a historic box, where your house is the box, to work with the building rather than fight with it. And he'll have some pictures and some great ideas to share with you. So I think that'll be a great discussion. And then at the end of the month, as I alluded to earlier during this call, we're gonna take a look at some tips for fall maintenance, things that you should do to get ready for winter, a little checklist for you, and then take another look under the hood with interior storm windows on how you can build them yourself. If you don't want to wait for a barn raising effort with Laura, maybe you're going to be cold this winter. So you might want to take a stab at this, and this will be fun to take a look at how it's done. And you can gauge for yourself whether it's an adventure you want to take or not. So any questions? Now that I babbed at you. Here we go. One question says, if we can't make it or we want to rewatch, will you be able to do that via video? The answer is absolutely yes. With the deck, we'll send around a link to the recorded video of this session, and it'll also be posted on our website. in our resources section. So thank you for that question. Okay, so a question for Dara. Our double hung windows stick a lot. Any suggestions or remedies? That's a classic question.
It's kind of hard to say without actually, trying them out. And I mean, probably there's a lot of paint buildup where there shouldn't be. Is a likely culprit.
Yeah, I'm on my phone. I thought I should get on. It's going to take me a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's different things. It's like, they all need repair of some sort, or most of them do.
Yeah.
Some of them are missing the rope. The rope's been broken over time.
Yeah.
Some of them don't, but it's. I mean, generally the one problem we have is it sticks. They stick a lot, especially I guess high humidity times.
Yep.
Or dampness times. And I'm trying to keep my husband from wanting to replace them.
A lot of times, if there's a lot of heavy paint buildup, or if I mean, traditionally that part of the jamb where the windows slide up and down is not painted. And if it gets painted over the years, then it sort of narrows everything in as the paint builds up there. So that can cause it to stick. If that's a likely culprit usually.
Yeah, we've been trying WD-40, kind of just down the slot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works too well. But anyway, I was just looking for answers because we haven't really come up with anything yet, and I really want to keep them around. They're really silicone spray. There he said, WD-40, whatever. Yeah, it's we're just trying. But I just was looking.
Sometimes if you remove the stop on the interior, you can ease that up a little bit.
Okay.
And it will not pinch as much.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, another guest suggested silicone spray. I saw
that.
After you say that, we
or
did
even,
have a question.
even wax, which won't last as long, but it will help with the slide.
Yeah. We've tried that and it hasn't worked as well. I mean, it changes from time to time. Sometimes the window will go straight up. Sometimes it will not. Right. And it's just a frustration. I mean, it's an old house thing.
Yeah.
So, but thanks. Yeah, we have wax, and so
Sometimes.
But thanks. This is good. I mean, this is good ideas.
And it's
sometimes the windows are
applied.
jamming up on heavy paint buildup, and you might need to do a little judicious paint removal where the window needs to slide.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ideal if the jambs aren't painted at all.
No, they are. I have to go back and look because the ones I'm thinking of aren't, but I may be not thinking of all of them.
Okay. So John and Jonathan, one of our guests asked, what experience do you have with Mortite applied to the inside of the window? It works well, takes time, but does it promote rot?
Mortite. I'm not. I don't think I've used that.
John, have you?
Well, it's one of the things you have to be careful of is making your windows too tight.
Yeah.
And so, but during the winter, if you have a window that you're not using, not opening and so on, Mortite is a temporary seal. Sure, it works. It can leave a slight residue behind, and that can be difficult to clean off, but certainly manageable. And but there's this big drive to really seal up these windows like they're in submarines or something. And these traditional window systems, particularly the double hung windows, are designed and developed over the last 450 years. And what a part of that design is to allow some air infiltration around the perimeter of the window sash. And that air infiltration takes away moisture that's building up in the joints of the sash and where the frame meets where the sill meets the jamb of the frame. And if you like seal up a window completely, it will start rotting after a time. And so allow some air ventilation is important. And if you're sealing up the windows, don't leave that seal up, don't leave that more tight up all summer long because it's in a back room and you forgot to do it. Take it out because some air needs to pass by that wood to keep it dry.
Great. Thank you for that. And a quick note for the crowd, Gretchen the gal in Hazardville with the windows that are available, she's offered them out. So if you're interested in talking to her, contact Maine Preservation. You can respond to the note when we send out the slides and the video or sooner, and we can connect you with her. You're welcome, Bill. And Jonathan Goodman indicated that he's had some good luck with a story at stormwindows.com. That link is there, Inner Storms, and we can add that to our resource set on the deck. Thanks. Any other questions from folks in the audience? Well, Greg, I'll turn it over to you for a couple comments if you'd like.
Very good. Thank you all for coming today, and really want to thank Laura Seaton and John Leake and of course Jonathan Hall on our staff and all the other staff that have helped with these. We put a great stock in these. We're now well beyond 500 participants in these events over time. So they've really expanded our audience, and thank you if you're new to us. Just some sort of personal, if you will, reflections or professional reflections on some of the things we've talked about today. We've had interior inserts at our headquarters for about 8 years. They're still working very well. One of the things that didn't get mentioned, they're very light. They weigh virtually nothing. So they're nothing like carrying around an exterior storm window. You can hold them in one hand and move them around and store them. We also have little tabs on ours, and I don't know if that's always standard. They were made by the landlady's son. These tabs are very useful because you can grab the tab, it's at the top of the window, and literally pull the window out with that tab. And then the whole thing comes out very easily. You can see through them very easily. You really you can't tell they're on. And then we also have exterior storms. So we're similar to John, where we've really got 4-ply windows because the interiors are really 2 different sets of coverings. So they work very well. Wanted to talk a little bit more about this window replacement scenario. These historic windows made of old growth wood, as Jonathan mentioned, are durable. They last a long time, particularly if they're maintained. And the problem with replacement windows, many of them are called maintenance free. And what maintenance free means is you can't fix them. So once there's a problem with those windows, they have to be replaced. And I've been told, I don't have actual verification of this, but 1/3 of the replacement window industry now is replacing replacement windows. And if you talk to people who've had replacement windows for about 10 years, most of them will tell you, oh yes, mine are starting to delaminate, the argon seeps out, so forth, so forth. So what we're doing from an environmental standpoint is really important to think about. We're taking a window that will last on into the century or centuries and replacing it with a window that you have to replace every 10 years. And it's never going to pay for itself. That's the argument that Jonathan is making. So one of the things that hurts the preservation industry is people are looking for net zero in the way of performance. It's very difficult to obtain, and in a historic building, it's virtually impossible unless you literally rip most of the fabric out of the building and put new fabric in. What's not calculated in that kind of a substantial rehab is the fact that you're actually causing more energy loss than you'll ever make up. And what I mean is, in the extraction, manufacture, transport, and re-erection of the new materials, that's not calculated into what's been used, what energy has been expended. So this whole notion of net zero does not account for the embodied energy, the energy that's in the building materials that exist already. When you throw out that good wood, and anybody that's picked up a 2x4 that's actually a real 2x4, it weighs incredibly much more than a new 2x4. We had a window repair guy working on a church in Farmington, and he counted the growth rings on that historic window. And there were 40 to 50 per inch on those windows. And then went down to the local purveyor of new windows and counted, and there were 3 to 5. So the historic windows are 10 times denser, and that's why they last so much longer. If you apply the same kind of logic to the general historic preservation standards, the more historic fabric you keep, the less energy you use in the long run. And it takes 40 to 50 years if you demolish an historic building and replace it with a net zero building, so it's using no energy, it takes 40 to 50 years to make up for the embodied energy you lost. So the new quiver the new arrow in our quiver in historic preservation is really this issue of embodied energy. And you can't make up that balance. So that's my little lecture, sorry, but my poor staff has heard this before. But really, it's very important, I think, going forward that we be talking about energy use. We don't have 40 or 50 years to wait to catch up. We have to treat these issues right away. And you can make historic buildings more efficient and still have them breathe, as John has been mentioning, and others. So thank you very much for your attendance today. We really want to again thank our sponsors, without which it would be impossible to carry out these programs. And we hope that you'll support us as well and donate to our mission too. So thanks for your participation this afternoon.
Thanks, Greg. And thank you everybody for attending today, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and a quick comment before we scoot. The old windows in the Sweden Main schoolhouse have about 40 growth rings per inch. That's awesome. Thanks, Dan, for that note. It's amazing how dense those woods are compared to what we have to work with today. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.
Have a good night. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.